In the previous video, we introduced the concept of styles and how to create text boxes and how to connect those text boxes amongst different pages within our document. In this video, we're going to cover a little bit more details about the styles, and then we're going to move on to importing actual images. Now, as you probably figured by now, with Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Animate, and Adobe InDesign, the base layout ability that you have is based on vector shapes. That means that any content, any shape that you create will in its background be a vector shape. It then follows logic that you can import a vector shape from a program like Illustrator or in Animate into InDesign by copying and pasting from one pasteboard to another. So it's extremely flexible. If your workflow is a little bit, if you're more familiar with the Illustrator workflow than you are with Animate or with InDesign, you can actually create the shapes for your text fields and for your image fields in those programs, and then copy and paste them into this program and then work with them native in the native format inside InDesign, meaning it will retain the vector information that created it. So let's go back to this to the styles where we left off on being able to change the colors of the characters and everything else. And one thing that I wanted to mention was creating bullet character styles. So let's go ahead and cancel this for just a second. And let me go ahead and create a new text box. And I want to define that text box to have a series of bullets. So let's say, for example, I want to utilize this space right here. And I want to create, bullet points. Bullet 1. Bullet 2, bullet 3, and bullet 4. I want to make that text a bit bigger. So I want to define that as a style in case I have bullet points elsewhere. So to do that, I want to go ahead and select the text that I want to define, through which I want to define the style. Then I'll go ahead and switch the typeface or the font, depending on what you're working on, to something that I work with. So let's say Avenir is what I was using for this particular document. Let's say Avenir Light. And I want to make it about 18 point. And now, let's say I want to have the tracking amongst the characters to be a little bit wider. So I want to space them out a little bit. So I choose tracking value of 50. Now, I want to go ahead and add the bullets to these particular three things. So one way to do that is by going under bullets here and simply clicking, and that adds bullets. But notice that that did not create a style for me. However, I can go ahead and define a style with what I have selected. So say, for example, I want these to be what defines my bullet style. I'll go ahead and select the actual text through which I want to define. Or actually, let me just go ahead and select this one right here, the top one. And I'm going to create a new style, and I'm going to call it bullets. Whoops, if I could type today. Bullets. That's going to be my bullet points. And I'm going to hit return so that it takes, and then I'm going to edit it. So I'll click on the drop down to get access to the edit icon, and then I'll click on that edit. That will open up the window for the bullets paragraph style. Then I'm going to go to the bullets area of that particular style, and it is here where I can define whether I want to have bullets or numbers. Let's choose bullets for now. If you choose bullets, it allows you to create specific types of bullets depending on what typeface you're working with. So whatever glyphs that typeface contains, you can add in here. You can also add based on specific glyphs from another font if you want to. That you also have the ability to control where the bullet point is in reference to the actual text. So if I want to go ahead and increase the left indentation of this, I can increase it, and you'll notice that the bullet is moving towards the text. And I can define that by pixels. If I want to do that, let's say I want to keep this at 12 pixels. And I can also move the position of my text by changing the tab position of the text. So I can change that as well. And I can indent the first line if I want to move the entire thing towards the left. I mean, towards the right or towards the left. So I can go ahead and move the original position of that particular line of text. With that defined, I can also change that to numbers. And you'll notice that it changes your bullet to a number. And you can then define through a specific format, you can define what constitutes a number or what constitutes an actual bullet. Now, just in short, so that you know, this is I don't want to call it script, but it is sort of script for this program, for InDesign. And that indicates this little arrow pointing upwards, and the number sign indicates that you will have a number, whatever the number happens to be in the list, and then a period, which you can see that there's a period there, and then the upper pointing arrow plus a T indicates a tab space. So every time I add a tab, that's basically the space between the beginning of the word and the bullet point. In this case, the number. So if I can go ahead and add extra things in there. If I know what I'm looking for, I can click on this arrow and choose whether I want to insert special characters, such as emp spaces, and spaces, and such. Now that is more of a graphic design, not graphic design, an InDesign class material. So I don't want to dig too deep into it, but you know that you have the ability to add extra characters in the bulleting of the definition of this particular paragraph style. So let's go ahead and switch that back from numbers to bullets. And I'm just simply going to use the little bullet here, and then I'll click OK. Now you'll notice that it only applied it to this, but just like with the styles for the titles, I can go ahead and double click and select areas of text that I want. And in this case, because they all have a hard return after each one of the lines, then they're separate lines. They're considered to be separate lines by the code. So if I go click on that and then select from the drop down bullets, you'll notice that they all become bullets. So I can apply that text and that paragraph style to all the text that I have selected at that point. This is how you create bullets through paragraph styles, and how you define a paragraph style for that specific type of text that you're trying to create. Now you can also, like I said before, the styles, the style definition, the actual style options offer a lot of things that you can work with. And once again, most of these things are referencing things that you should have learned in your InDesign course, or if you're a graphic designer, that's more that's the realm into which you will learn how to work with all these things. By this time in your multimedia journey, you should have been exposed to these things. If you haven't, then I suggest you take the InDesign course so that you understand what all of these things do for you. Extremely useful, extremely time-saving, and they work like as you see, just like styles would work in HTML documents. Now, with that in mind, let's just go ahead and create a new document. I'm just going to create a new document, and I am going to go File, New, and then I'm going to choose iPad again. I'm just going to keep on using the same style that I've been working with. And this has, I forgot to do it. Let me turn that off, and let me create a new one, and I'm going to turn off the primary text frame, which I don't want to have. I'll create new. And now in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to import text. Now, we're going to import images. So to do that, the first thing, like I said before, there are several ways of importing. Just like when you created text, and by the way, you can also import text, you have the ability to create, to import all this media into placeholders. These placeholders is what we call frames in InDesign. So you can have a text frame or an image frame. Now, this is an important concept to understand. Frames are placeholders. That's all they are. They are in out of themselves, they're objects. So think of them as a movie clip almost. And inside that movie clip, you can have anything you want to have. So in our case, we can have text, or we can have images, or we can have sounds or video, depending on what we're importing into those placeholders. The placeholder is separate from what's inside it, meaning the content is completely separate from the placeholder. What does that mean? Well, let's take a look at this really quick. If I, let's say, go ahead and define a rectangle frame by clicking on the rectangle, and by the way, you can use either the rectangle, the frame tools that you have here, or you can use the shape tools, or you can draw your own shapes to create the frames that you are going to be using. The frame, the shape changes to a frame when you select to import something into it. So any shape can turn into an actual frame. So let's start with the default. Let's start with a text, or let's actually start with an ellipse frame so that you can see what this does. So I'm going to drag with the ellipse frame. I'm going to click and drag, and I'm pressing Shift to constrain proportions. You'll notice that the ellipse frame contains an X across it that indicates that that is a frame, compared to a shape frame, a shape tool, which is basically just a shape. Now, this shape is no different than a circle. It's an Illustrator. This one is specific to this program. This shape here, this frame is specific to the program, but it behaves pretty much the same way as this does. And as a matter of fact, this circle, just like this is a vector-based circle, behaves the same way as the frame. And if I were to import something into that circle, it will turn into a frame. So how do I control these things? Well, depending on what I'm working on, let me select, and you'll notice that my properties change. The properties for my frame give me framing, fitting, and other things that other properties that you see down here that allow me to import a file directly into it or convert it to a shape. This one here doesn't have those abilities. However, it does allow me to convert the shape into a frame if I were to import something into it. Okay, it allows me to align things inside it, though. It allows me to create alignment and text wrapping based on whatever I'm importing into those particular shapes. A good thing to know is that, like I said, this is an object. If I import something into it, that something is completely separate from the object. That is, this object here, I can change its color. So if I go and select the circle and I make it, let's say, this blue, it turns blue. Let me change the color of the stroke. I'm going to make it black, and I'm going to increase the size so you see what that looks like. So that is basically a circle, just a circle shape like you found it in Illustrator or in Adobe Animate. In this case, when I select the frame, I have the exact same ability. I can change the background color, and I can change the stroke color, as you can see, behaving pretty much the same way as the circle. So there's really no significant difference. Now, I can use my direct selection tool to select my circle, and you'll notice that I have access to the vector points, just like I would a shape in Illustrator or in Animate. If I click on the actual frame tool, same thing happens. You see that I have access to the actual anchor points so that I can modify it as well. I also have access to the content inside it, like I said, when I'm importing anything to it. So they are pretty much the same thing. They behave the same way. And if I preview by pressing W, they look exactly the same. So there's really no significant difference. So why have one versus the other? Once again, this one is a shape, and it behaves as a vector file. This one doesn't. This one is a frame inside the program. Now, how do they work? How do I import things into it? Let me select that frame and import something into it. To import items, images in this case, into that frame, I go to File, Place. And when I place, I'm going to go look for some images. Let's say I go to this lecture here, and I am going to import that file, cheesecake. It's an image of cheesecake. Now, when I click on that, you'll notice that because I had that file selected, it imported an image. And that image seems to be gigantic compared to the size of my frame. So my frame is completely covered by that image that seems to be significantly bigger. Notice that I have my frame selected, and if I move my frame, let me go ahead and move the frame itself by clicking and dragging on it. I am moving the entirety of the frame. But if I roll over the center of the frame, and you probably, on your case, when you roll over it, because I'm capturing, I don't see that little icon that shows in the middle, but you should see when you roll over the center, you notice that my cursor changes to a hand. In your case, you will see a little orange circle. And that is, you actually, if you click on that circle, you are manipulating the content inside the frame. So if I click on the frame itself on the side and I move it, I am moving the frame. But if I click and drag on that little circle in the center, I am actually changing the position of whatever is inside that particular frame. So that tells you that the content inside that frame is separate from the frame itself. The object that you have selected outside is the frame. The content inside the object is completely separate. That tells you that you can actually select that item by clicking on it. You'll notice that there's like a brown outline or a yellowish outline outside the frame. That is the content inside that frame. You can actually resize that by going to its handles. Let's press Shift to constrain proportions, and you'll notice that I can actually manipulate the sizing of that object, that content inside that frame. So I can resize accordingly. I can also automate the way of resizing by choosing out of my frame fitting options down here. So if I have the object selected, let's say I select the frame and I want to auto fit things inside it, then I can select whether I want to fill the frame proportionally, which will change the size of my object to fit the actual frame proportionally, but maintaining the proportions of it. Or I can, let me undo that really quick. I can select the next one, which is fit content proportionally, which is it resizes the content all the way to the point where the entirety of the content is inside my frame, but you'll notice that I see a gap that is letting me see behind on the what would be otherwise empty space, or in our case, because we gave the background a color to the object, that blue area. So let me undo that again. I can also resize to fit content to frame, which squeezes. You'll notice that my cheesecake sort of got taller than wider, and that is because it squeezed it to fit, to make sure that the entirety of the object, what was before a rectangular image, take a look, it is rectangular now. It made it square to fit the proportions of my frame. So you have the ability to choose how you want the content to fit within that frame. If I click on the first one, fill frame proportionally, you basically will have the best option for fitting your content and maintaining the proportions of the content inside that particular frame. You also have access to this frame fitting by right-clicking and selecting from the flyout menu, fitting, and you have all of the exact same settings that you find under your properties window. So the fill frame proportionally option is the top one, and it will do the exact same thing. So that's one way to fit things into frames. Now, another thing that you can do, let's select now, in this case, the circle. And I'm going to now use my shortcut Control-D or Command-D on the Mac to import the image into that circle. So if I go Command-D and I choose cheesecake and then I click Open, you will notice that now the circle has turned into a frame and it behaves the exact same way as the frame does over here. Remember, that image is separate from the actual frame. So I can at any time select the frame of any of these two, and I can affect its stroke value to increase it or decrease it. I can also go to my direct selection tool, click on one of the handles for that particular shape, and I can modify the shape. As you can see, giving you quite a lot of flexibility as to the particular objects that or the shapes that you want to populate within your design. So you're no longer constrained to have rectangles and circles or predefined shapes. You can create your own, like I said before. And this behaves the exact same way as with the cheesecake. So if I select that frame here and I go fit proportionally, then it fits everything proportional based on the size of the frame that I have created, giving you that much flexibility. So that is one way to import things. You create a shape, you define the shape, and that's extremely helpful. And then select the shape into which you want to import something and press Command-D or Control-D or go File, Place, and it will place the image inside that frame. Then you can resize or modify the placement of that image. You can also rotate the image or the content inside the frame. So if you select the actual content and go to one of the corner handles for the image itself, you'll notice that you get the little arrows that you get in Illustrator that allow you to rotate the content inside the frame. So you have the ability to control that as well inside, or you can actually rotate the frame as well. So if you select the frame, go to the corner, and you can rotate the frame as well. So you have quite a lot of flexibility on the design. Now, what happens when I have a lot of things that I want to import? Well, if you want to do that, you can select several, you can create several frames. So let's say I want to create 4 different boxes, 4 different frames. Let's choose frames this time. So I'm going to use a rectangle, a frame. Actually, I'll just do frames for the rest of these. And I just want to import 4 images, let's say. So I want to populate those 4 different areas. And I have 4 images that I have in my computer somewhere, and I want to import them. Then I'll just go ahead and say place them, please. So I'll use the shortcut Control-D or Command-D on the Mac or File, Place. And then I'll press Shift click or Control click, depending on if you're selecting them sequentially or separately. You will choose different images. So in this case, I want to choose cheesecake, and then I'm going to press Control on my keyboard because I don't want to select cinnamon rolls. I want to use coconut, creme brulee, and let's say panna cotta. I want to use those 4. So that is 4 images that I have selected using my Control key. I can also select, let's say, the top 4 by pressing Shift and clicking on the last one that selects the 4 that I want. So it's up to you how you want to select these things. Now that you have select several, either you use the Shift for continuous selection or the Control key for specific ones. Let me go ahead and click open. Now you'll notice that my cursor changes into the image of the into whatever the first thing I selected in the sequence, and then it gives me a little 4 in this case, a little number 4, which tells me that I have 4 images in memory that are being ready to be pasted into my document. So I can now go and click on each one of these frames one at a time and dump each one of those images that I imported into each one of the frames. That is time saving because I can import several things at the same time and then place them in different frames. They all don't have to look the same. All the frames don't have to look the same. In this case, I just simply created them that way. And now if I select everything, all of the frames by dragging a selection across them, I can now go ahead and modify all of them at the same time to tell all 4 of them, please fill the frame proportionally. And you notice that all of the images got resized proportionally to fit. Now, fitting proportionally means that your images might be wider in the background than the actual frame, than the actual visual area. But that is what you want. You want to make sure that you maintain the proportionality of the images so that things don't look like they're squashed or stretched based on what you are creating and what you're importing. In this case, this image is pretty much matching the frame exactly, so that worked out well for that particular case. Another way to import things is to not even create the text boxes. So say, for example, or the receiving boxes, sorry, the frames. So let's say, for example, I want to import 4 images and I go Control D or Command D. You'll notice that I did not create any frames. So now I'm going to go ahead and select the top 4 and I'm going to click open. They are in memory right now. So if I were to start clicking and dragging right now, it will create a frame that is the size of the first image that I have imported. The first image that I selected, it's maintaining the proportions of that particular image. As I am dragging, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press on the up arrow on my keyboard. You will notice that it creates an extra frame and now it becomes flexible. It no longer it retains the proportions of the first one. If I use my right arrow, I am creating frames to the right. If I use my left arrow, I am reducing the amount of frames. I'm still clicking and dragging my mouse, by the way. I haven't let go of my mouse. So if I click and drag and I keep it clicked and I use the up arrow, I am increasing the amount of frames vertically. If I press down, I'm reducing the amount of frames vertically. If I press on the right arrow as I'm clicking and dragging, I am increasing the amount of frames horizontally, and if I press the left arrow, I am decreasing the amount of frames horizontally. So up for vertical, right for horizontal, and the opposites are for reducing the amount of frames. So I need 4 frames in this case. So if I press 1, 2, and 3 times, now I have 4 frames that I've created on the fly as I am dragging a frame box. And when I let go, each one of those images in memory will be placed in its own frame. Now, the frames are all the same size as you can see. So I can, at this point, because all 4 of them are selected, I can click on the fit frame proportionally and all the images will be resized accordingly to fit within the boxes, within the frames that we've created. So this is a way of actually creating several containers, several frames at the same time by importing and placing items into the particular in those frames that you're creating by defining with the arrows the areas that you want to populate. Now, just on closing for this, what we want to show is I want to go ahead and import text into a text box. So say, for example, I create a frame, and this time I'm going to be doing a shape with my pen tool. And I'm going to close it just like I would in Illustrator. So that is my frame, let's say, and I want to import text into this text box or into this frame that I've created into this shape. How do I do that? Same way, simply select the shape that you want to import into, in this case, this particular shape, go File, Place, and then go look for the document that you want to import into that particular frame. So in this case, let's say, for example, I want to import this text. That's a text, and there's a lot of text on that. So let's go ahead and click. In this case, I want to show options really quick. So as I'm importing the text, is going to show me these options, and it's going to tell me basically what I want to see here is what do I want to include for where this is coming from, which is a time saver. Because for you, if you have a document that was provided to you by a client, then you can ask them to do all these things for you on their end, and then you simply import them into your document, saving you a lot of time. You can also maintain the styles that are coming in from wherever the document is coming from. In this case, from Word. So in Word, if the client has predefined styles for that particular text that they want to maintain within their application, all you need to do is import them through importing the different styles, and it will create them for you inside the InDesign document, as you will see in just a second. So I'm just gonna go ahead and click OK on this, and you'll notice that the text will be put into that text box. You'll notice that there's overset text because there's a lot of text in here, and you will notice that there's a paragraph style that was created for you called normal. Now, if there had been a predefinition of text in Illustrator that had, in Word that had titles or quotations or things like that, it will all appear here if I had created those styles within that document. But you'll notice that it created something called normal, which is this text right here, the actual base text for the document that was imported. What is important to notice here is that the text got imported into a text box and into that shape, and if I modify the shape, as I will right now, basically the text will align based on however I am creating the shape of that box as I'm modifying it. Let me press W on the keyboard to hide my guides, and you'll notice that the text is basically hugging my image. So you have a lot of flexibility on controlling how the text wraps around or plays around the different objects. Now, for true wrapping around and having text actually reflow across around images, and in this case image frames, we will be seeing that in the next frame where we actually start creating a layout for an application.